Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Manitoba Agriculture and Resource Development CropTalk webinar. If you have any questions during today's presentation, please type them into the question section of the GoToWebinar menu, and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a link to the recording. Thank you.
Thanks, Mandy. I'd like to welcome everybody to the September 1st edition of Crop Talk. Year is flying by, and we're into September and well into harvest. We've had a few glitches with some rain here that slowed guys down, but I think over the last couple of days we've seen a lot more combines in the field again, and barring any rain today, I think we might even get some of the stuff getting down to being dry in a lot of the areas. So that'll be another good sign. With today, we thought because we were looking at some grain coming off and maybe not as dry conditions as we would like, I thought to maybe talk a little bit about some grain storage tips, talk a little about aeration, and then there was a program announced yesterday for livestock producers for the feed shortage program, and I thought we would talk about that and kind of go through some of the details and see what the program is all about, just to kind of give everybody a general idea of the program and then where to go look for more details. Before we get into all that though, where are we sitting with harvest? And when you look at it all, we're probably we're getting anywhere from a third to half done harvest, and like I said, it hasn't changed a whole bunch from last week because of the rain we got. A lot of areas last week reported anywhere from an inch to 5 inches of rain depending on where you were, and it definitely wet things up, and it took a little while for things to dry down. So hopefully, like I mentioned, we're going to get going again here and be getting combines and getting some dry grain in the bin. Okay, the programs that were announced. There was 2 announced yesterday, and I believe they're still working on maybe another 1 or 2 additions to the program. But the ones that were announced yesterday was the Livestock Feed and Transportation Drought Assistance Program, and that will provide assistance to buy and test feed for eligible livestock and transport purchased feed from distant locations. The other one was the Livestock Transportation Drought Assistance, and that'll provide financial assistance to help offset extraordinary freight expenses associated with moving livestock to alternative feed locations. So first one is basically buying and moving feed, and the second one is if you need to move livestock, a program set up to help cover the cost of moving livestock to different locations. So we'll break it down and talk about each program individually. So the Livestock Feed and Transportation Drought Assistance Program is a program that will help producers affected by low moisture in 21 to purchase feed in order to maintain their breeding herds. And that's, I guess, the key to the whole program is breeding herds. Producers may be eligible to apply for assistance to buy and test feed for eligible livestock and or transport purchased feed from distant locations. So you are eligible for both of those programs under this, both of those fundings under this program. So who qualifies? Well, they're primary producers who own or lease the eligible animals located in Manitoba as of June 1st. So it is retroactive back to June 1st, and continue to own or lease them to March 15th or later are eligible. So retroactive to June 1st, but you must own the livestock at least till March 15th of next year. And so basically the feed you're purchasing is going to be used to feed those animals through the winter. Eligible animals include breeding head of beef, dairy, horses for PMU, sheep, goats, and bisons. And again, the key words there is the breeding head. Breeding animals are mature females exposed to bulls or AI, and the males used previously for breeding. So bulls that were used last spring or last year for breeding would be eligible as well. The producer must own or lease a minimum of 10 animals to be able to apply to the program. So the applicant must be 18 years of age or older at the time of application, partnership or corporation, a cooperative, a commune, or a First Nation. You have to own or lease the eligible animals as the date of application. Continue to own or lease the eligible animals from June 1st until March 15th, and be responsible for expenses related to feeding the eligible animals. You must be liable to pay income tax under the Income Tax Act, or specifically exempt from filing income tax, but it is a permanent resident of Canada and must file farm and expense tax forms. So monies received through this program are going to be taxable. So the assistance and how it's going to be broken down. The livestock feed assistance is provided for eligible activities and expenses incurred from June 1st, so retroactive to June 1st to March 15th of next year. And it's for winter feed purchased for eligible breeding animals, feed testing to determine the nutritional value of the eligible animals. And it's assumed that you'd be feed testing the feed you're purchasing, so they'd be all in part of the one application. Only purchased feed and feed testing is eligible for livestock feed and transportation drought assistance. The feed must be consumed within the overwintering period, and the eligible feeds that can be purchased for eligible animals from June 1st to March 15th to maintain them over the winter include grazed corn and green feed, mechanically harvested hay, silage, green feed, corn stover, straw, including those purchased as standing crop or grazed in a swath. So if you're buying somebody's crop that was written off by crop insurance and putting it up as feed, that is eligible. Swath grazing, again, if you're purchasing somebody's crop and just going to swath graze it, that is eligible. Grains and concentrates, commercially prepared pellets, screenings, dry distilled grain are eligible. And then there will be some feeds that will get approved through the program administrator, and those are going to be probably done on a case-by-case basis. So how does the payment work for the livestock feed assistance? The administrator will make payments to the applicant for purchases of testing of eligible feed made by purchases and testing of eligible feeds made by June 1st to March 15th as follows. On a per head basis, the producer's share will be applied at $50 per head for beef and dairy cattle, bison and PMU, and $10 per head for sheep and goats. Payments will be equal to 75% of the purchase cost of the feed and the feed testing that exceed the producer's share to a maximum per head payment. The maximum payment is going to be $250 per head for beef, dairy, cattle, bison, and horses for PMU, and $50 per head for sheep and goats. So initially there'll be a $50 per head cost to the producer, and then the $250 would be a 25-75% split till you max out at $250 per head. Purchases must be supported by invoices and proof of payment indicating the type of feed you purchased, the number of tons purchased, the purchase price, the name and contact information of the seller, the date purchased, the type of feed tested and test completed if you're going to do that. And in order to submit an application, the minimum value of the receipts must be $500. And as you remember earlier on, I mentioned you have to have at least 10 head. So 10 head at the $50 would be $500. So that covers the feed purchase side of the program. Now we're going to get into the feed transportation side of the program. So the feed transportation side, assistance is provided for the movement of eligible hay, straw, green feed, stover, silage to be eligible breeding animals to address feed shortages due to the drought conditions. Payments for the feed transportation costs for eligible feeds purchased and transported between June 1st and March 15th. And there's a minimum distance of 40 kilometers and up to a maximum one-way distance of 600 kilometers. Payments will be based on the following rates. There's 16 cents per ton per kilometer for the first 100 kilometers of haul. And after the first 100 kilometers, it drops to 10 cents per ton per kilometer for the remainder of the haul for up to an additional 500 kilometers. So that would bring you up to the 600 kilometers. Payments for each receipt provided by the applicant will be the payment rate multiplied by the distance transported, multiplied by the number of tons transported. If you're getting a custom haul, then you have a receipt from the trucker. Whichever is less is what will be going by. So the minimum value of the receipts required, whichever is less, and the minimum value of receipts required to submit an application is $500. Transportation assistance is additional to assistance to that may be received for feed assistance. So you could receive money from the feed assistance purchase program, and you can also receive money from the feed transportation. So if you buy the feed, you can get money back, and if you are money to help cover the cost, and if you're transporting the feed more than 40 kilometers, you can also get assistance to move that feed to your home location. So that takes care of the first part of the program, and now we'll go into excuse me, into the livestock transportation drought assistance. So this was going to be the moving of livestock. So the available assistance, the livestock transportation assistance is provided for eligible activities and expenses incurred from August 1st to June 30th. So you'll notice a difference in dates there. And the reason for that is that at the beginning of the year, most producers probably weren't in a situation where they needed to move livestock because of the drought conditions. But as the season went on, then it became more needed. So that's why the August 1st start date. And you'll notice the day actually goes longer to the June 30th date, which is taking into account getting things ready for next spring for pasturing. Transportation costs associated with the moving of the eligible breeding female animals and breeding males to the alternative feeding location to meet their winter feed requirements. Costs for eligible animals transported between August 1st and June 30th for a minimum distance, again, of 40 kilometers and a maximum one-way distance of 1,000 kilometers. And distance is larger there based on the fact it's usually a lot easier to move livestock to feed, so you can probably move them a farther distance to get them to winter feeding area than trying to bring all that feed in. So that's why the bigger or the larger kilometers. Payments were based on the number of head and again as on a kilometers. So breeding beef cattle, 8 cents per head per loaded kilometer, and breeding sheep, goats, 3 cents per head per loaded kilometer. This program can be combined with livestock feed and transportation drought assistance, excluding feed transportation. So that's a little bit of I guess, explanation of the program. There is a lot of information on our website, and there's the direct link to the application forms. They're online, and you can start filling them out as soon as you want. There's the 1-844 number for if you have questions and need to talk to somebody regarding the program. One thing I forgot to mention was that you can apply several different times. So if you make a feed purchase today and want to apply to get the funding paid to you, so you get the money quicker, you can put that application in, and then later on, if you go on and buy some more feed, you can put in an application to get monies back quicker, and you can keep doing that until you reach your max of $250 per head. So it doesn't have to be until you get all your feed purchased. You can do it on a continuous basis. So I guess with that, I'm going to leave the program talking about the livestock feed program, and if there's questions, I can take them anytime throughout here. But right now, I don't see any questions coming up, so I'm going to continue on and talk a little bit about grain aeration. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to break it down into a few sections. First of all, talk about why aerate, how long we should be looking at aerating, fan sizes, talk a little bit about natural air drying, and maybe a little bit about adding heat to your air drying. So why aerate? Well, a lot of times when we're harvesting, and I think this is probably one of the years that we've probably seen it more recently than in the past couple of years, is that we're removing, if the storage is filled with warm or hot grain, problems can occur even if the moisture content is low. So in the field, if we're combining and we have high temperatures outside, we could be putting warm or hot grain into the bin. And if we do that, problems can happen. High field heat or inadequate cool grain from our dryer is another reason to aerate. The other one is hot grain will stay hot for a considerable length of time because of the air spaces between the kernels. So even though you're putting this hot grain in the bin, you may think, oh, well, it'll cool off through the night. It actually holds its heat fairly well. So it's another good reason to aerate, or to get the heat out of the grain through aeration. Another reason to aerate is to equalize moisture content within the grain. And as you harvest and storage is filled, the incoming grain will have varying moisture contents due to changes in grain maturity, weather conditions, and drying fluctuations. And we've all seen it where you do some headlands or do some low spots, some areas in the fields that have some weeds that stayed a little bit greener, and so your hopper's got a lot of green matter in it at different times during the day. And so you could be putting in different temperature and different moisture grain into your bin. Those hot spots can spoil zones can develop in the bin, even though the average condition of the grain is dry. So what aeration will do is it'll brings the grain to the same moisture content throughout the grain, because what you're doing is pushing air through the grain. It's moving the moisture through the bin and basically helping it equilibrate throughout your bin. When to aerate? Aerating grain is as soon as possible after placing it into storage. Nowadays it doesn't take long to fill bins and get a lot of grain in a bin in a short period of time. It's really important to get the fans running once you got, usually it's recommended if you got a rocket in the bin or a cone in the bin, once the cone is covered. This way you get a better spreading of the air blowing through the bin. And what you'll do is it just helps the temperature and the moisture flow throughout the bin. When we get into fall, cool the grain to match the average outdoor temperature. So begin aeration when there is more than 5 degrees Celsius difference between the average outside temperature and the grain in the bin, and continue cooling in stages until winter. And so basically monitor your temperature in the bin. If you've got a temperature of the grain of 26 or 25, make sure, and the air temperature outside is only 20, let's say, turn the fans on to get that difference between the outside and inside temperature more consistent. So when you're looking at aeration, one of the things you should be looking at is your airflow rate, and depending on your airflow rate of the fan, blowing air through the grain will result in grain conditioning or cooling, or in some cases may result in grain drying. So depending on the size of your fan and what it's blowing, what is blowing through, or the static pressure is how they're going to depend on what you're going to do with the grain. So the airflow rate from the fan depends on your fan specifications and the static pressure. And the static pressure is the resistance to the airflow in the bin. So it'll depend on your grain type. So peas would be better than flax. You'll get more airflow through peas than flax. You'll get more air through in peas than canola. Barley more than wheat. So also the depth of your grain, because the more the wind or the air has to blow through a larger area, it's going to need more airflow rate. And in a lot of cases, the type of ducting as well. If the ducting is specifically made for a bin, then you probably have the right airflow rates. But if your ducting is too small for the bin, then you're probably going to have some issues with getting enough air through there. So it's all about airflow rate. So if you want to aerate, which is grain conditioning or cooling, your low airflow rate is 0.1 to 0.2 cubic feet per meter or per minute per bushel. So that is small fan on a bin, just to keep it in, the grain in proper condition and cooling it down. If you're wanting to do more than that, maybe remove some moisture, you need a high airflow rate. So you're going to need 1 to 2 cubic foot per minute per bushel to get any of that, to get any potential air drying. So definitely a big difference in fan size when you're looking at that. And when we look at some of these larger bins, we can see why they're mainly meant just to keep grain in condition, and you're not going to get a lot of drying. Time of year also is going to be in your favor. Earlier in the year, if you can get crop off in August to early September, we're going to see better chances of actually drying grain with aeration. Once we get in later into the season and we get different humidity rates and different temperatures and cooler temperatures, we're probably going to be in a situation that we're really going to be looking at grain conditioning and cooling. So successful natural air drying requires proper size aeration fan. The fan must force 3/4 to 1 cubic foot per minute through the bin of a grain in order for the moisture to be drawn out and expelled. So for an example, on a 25,000 bushel bin, they usually come with 2 10 horsepower fans. When you look at the requirements to blow air through this bin, you'll probably stall out at about 17,000 bushels, where you're going to start to lose the ability of the fans to blow enough air through the grain to do any natural drying. And you'll be in a situation where what you'll be left with is cooling and conditioning of the grain, but no actual drying. So I think this is where, when you're setting up a bin, you need to know the size of fan, know what they're rated for, know the cubic feet per minute that it'll blow through the grains, and all that is available when you're purchasing the fans and knowing the size of the bin. So that's the key when you're setting up a bin for aeration, is to make sure you have that type of the correct fans to do the job. The other thing you're looking at doing when you're adding air to a bin is you're looking at the equilibrium moisture content. And the air's capacity to dry is dictated by the EMC of the grain. And the EMC depends on the air temperature, the air relative humidity, and the grain type. So for every temperature / relative humidity combination, air has a specific EMC or point where the moisture in the air and the grain have reached a steady state of equilibrium. At this point, the air will not take moisture or give moisture to the grain. So when you get to that equilibrium point, your grain is set at that moisture, and you're not going to change it. And when you look at an example, and these charts are available, probably can find them anywhere online. This is the one for wheat. So if you're looking at an example, if the air has a relative humidity of 50%, so kind of just your average fall day where we're looking at, and you know, maybe a little later on because the temperature I've got here at 5 degrees Celsius, but you know, we're probably looking at a little bit higher until probably next couple weeks. Its EMC for wheat is 13.1%. So what does that mean? That means if you blow air that has a relative humidity of 50% at a temperature of 5 degrees Celsius through the wheat will eventually equilibrate at 13.1%. Whether the wheat started out at 8% moisture or 14%, it doesn't matter. You're going to be with that humidity and with that temperature. That's what you'll end up equilibrating at moisture-wise in the bin. Now these, I mentioned those charts are available online, and here would be the chart for barley, and there's a chart for peas, and one for canola and one for oats. So again, readily available and good to have when you're trying to figure out, especially when your moisture levels are going to be all over the board. Once you determine what your moisture level is, you can know if you actually can do any drying with your grain or with your aeration. How do grain conditions affect the air's capacity to dry? Well, warm air plus warm grain, you'll get drying if you're blowing your fans. Warm air plus cool grain, and more than likely you'll get wetting, because as the warm air goes through the grain, it'll warm it, and when you warm cool, you get sweating, and so your grain will get wetter. Cool air plus warm grain equals quick short-term drying, but only for about 1 or 2% moisture, because once your temperature equilibrates, it's not going to change much from there, and it won't take long for the cool air to cool the grain off. And cool air plus cool grain equals basically no change, and so what you're doing is you're basically keeping your grain at a constant temperature and just basically holding it. So a lot of times you often get asked, when is the best time to run your fans? And for safe storage of all grain types in a variety of different ambient conditions, so different temperature conditions, run fans continuously. This way you know you're always moving grain through there, and especially if your grain is at higher moisture levels, it's definitely good to make sure that you're running your fans continuously to keep the air flowing through the bin. Minimal fan hours with grain, when grain is only 1 to 2% above dry, run fans at night only. And by doing that, you'll be keeping the grain cool and pretty consistent at that 1 to 2% above dry. With minimal fan hours, when the grain is more than 1 to 2% above dry, run fans during the day only, because this way you'll be trying to take advantage of some of the heat that's in the air, and hopefully maybe getting some opportunity to maybe drop at a point or two. If you have uniform moisture content and you don't want to over dry, run fans during the day until the average MC is 1 to 2, moisture content is 1 to 2% above dry, then run fans at night until grain is cool. Tough grain will try and over dry again. Will re-wet. So if you run fans at night, you keep it cool. keep an eye on it just to make sure you don't have any hot spots. But and if you do, then you'll need to run the fans during the day again as well. So that covers the grain aeration for today, and we didn't have a lot of questions for the crop scouting panel, so we're going to not have that one today. What we're going to do though is we're going to go through a few slides here to just talk about some of the projects that are still available. The application deadline is extended till October 1st for the BMP of 503 for funding to support water source development. So if you're still interested or still needing to do that, fall is still a good time of year to do it. So definitely look into that program. Now more than ever, the hay listing service is going to become important. So if you're looking at buying hay, selling hay, that's the web address for getting onto our hay listing service. So definitely go there. We're that time of year again where crop residue burning is becoming more important. So if you're looking to burn and you're in an area that has a burning ban or you need a permit to burn, that's the website for getting that information. There's our ag adaptation specialists. If you've got questions, is something that they can help you with. They definitely will, and it's I guess something that if you got questions, definitely look at asking them. I'm just got a question coming in here right now, and just a question came in: if his heat applied to non-GM canola for pre-harvest, is that okay? And Jade, I'm going to have to double check. If I'm going to give you the answer off the top of my head, I'm going to say yes, it is, but I just would like to double check that just to make sure for you. So I will check that and get back to you. I will send you an email later on here, but I think it is okay. There are our provincial farm production extension specialists, livestock. If you've got questions regarding the program, if you've got questions regarding feed rations, anything to help you get through the winter with extending your feed sources, please feel free to contact these people. They have lots of experience in doing feed rations and working with you to plan a program for the winter. So definitely get them involved in your program. Crop insurance offices, the packages, if you aren't able to get online to get the information for the program, packages will be available at all the crop insurance offices or all the MASC offices, and there's the locations of the MASC offices and their phone numbers. So definitely get in contact with them. And again, if you've got any questions regarding the program, regarding any issues that may come up over the next week, you know, give us a call and join us next week, September the 8th, for the next Crop Talk.
Thanks, Lionel. Have a great day, everyone.